shows it is a sample of what we might call cross-cultural life. Plus the fact that he was one of the renowned USAFE veterans. Because my husband was liaison pilot for General Jonathan Wainwright.
The one who was left
who took
behind.
place who was left behind. So I asked him to write stories about that, and he wrote up his stories, his experiences with General Wainwright. He wrote also for me the story of the fall of Bataan and the death march and his life in the prison camp, because he was also a prisoner of war. So there's so much to write about that's so interesting and inspiring. Plus the fact that the Rogers family suffered both ways, because he was imprisoned and in Capas, while his father was imprisoned naman in the internment camp in UST.
How old, Mom, when you met? How old?
Well, he's 8 years older than I was, so I was 24 and he was 32.
Okay.
So.
But before the war broke out, you didn't have a boyfriend?
No, I did not. No, I never dreamed.
UP,
You know.
UP,
No, because he was
start.
already in the he was already in flying school.
Hindi, I mean, Ma'am, a Filipino boyfriend.
Ay, naku, dami.
Hindi, Ma'am, sa...
Marami kung sa ano.
Sa UP?
Pero namatay sila. Namatay sila sa war. Oo.
Classmates siya sa UP?
Oh, well, I was, in UP, before the war, malaking bagay yung magiging kang cadet sponsor.
Okay.
And I was one of them. Pag sinabing she is a sponsor, that means, again, she's identified as, well, beauty and brains kind of thing. So, my sister and I were both sponsors for the...
Younger sister?
A younger sister who also passed away already. But I was the first sponsor of the Signal Corps.
Signal Corps? What is...
Because at the time, in 1941, that was the first time the ROTC organized a Signal Corps. Alam mo, Signal Corps, yung yung telephone, yung communication. Before that, wala eh. So I was very proud of the fact that I was the first Signal Corps sponsor. My cadet captain was an engineer from Lubao. Huwag mo na isulat yan, ha?
Okay.
Kung yan kasi baka, I don't even want to give names, pero namatay siya. Namatay din siya.
Siya yung first boyfriend.
So, hindi mo mawala yung pagka siya ang cadet. Siya ang cadet mo, ikaw ang sponsor. Siyempre, during the year, we thought we would, in fact, he wanted to get married when the war broke out. But because many of us got married when the war broke out, thinking, alam mo na, that in desperation, so many girls got married, young girls, and the boys all wanted to get married before they went to war. But what happened was they all either died in the battlefields or died in concentration camp or in Bataan. And all of these classmates of mine really became widows. But I had, for some reason, I'm a very sensible woman when it comes to crisis like that. I never allow my sentiments to carry me away. So I said no. I didn't want to get married, and
but you were together for like a year or 2 years.
Well, yung steady, hindi naman yung formal na engagement na gano'n. Kasi ako din, I did not want a formal engagement. Although his family wanted a formal engagement, ako ayokong
po?
mahirap. I think marriage is a very serious matter. I still, in the back of my mind, wanted somebody with wings. Because my hobby really was flying eh. I mean, I did not fly, but I collected airplanes before the war. And I could identify, I was very proud of myself because I could I could see the silhouette of a plane and I'd be able to identify that plane. So when and then I also, when I was in PAL, I mistrusted the pilots because they're very glamorous. These boys are very glamorous, but they're very fickle. They're talagang lady killers lang yan. No?
Okay.
But strangely enough, this man that I met was really a very shy person. Okay. Here, you will read it here. How we got to know each other, and how we got engaged. You will see how shy he was. He was very Filipino in that sense. Kasi what my husband had American characteristics and Filipino characteristics.
He grew up here? Or?
Oh yes, he was born here. And
in Dubai?
No, to si Rogers, my husband.
Yeah, he grew up.
He was born in Batangas. And then his father was a official of the U.S. Navy. After he retired from the military, he worked for the U.S. Navy in Cavite, U.S. Navy Yard. So he grew up in the U.S. in Cavite. And because he was the only brown son. All of them were mestizos. Siya, mukha niya Filipino. Pero ang katawan niya, Caucasian, because he was very long-legged and...
ano pong height niya?
6 feet, 6 feet 8 siguro.
6
6 feet. 5 foot 8. 5'8", oo. Ay, makikita mo naman ang aming ayan.
Yung features niya,
Pero, yeah.
Tapos, ma'am, you grew up here in Manila?
Ako? Yes, I'm a Manileña. I was born in Malate.
Okay.
And my
your
parents,
house was there?
My mother is from the old city of Cavite. I don't know if you're aware that when before the war, when they say Caviteño, that means inside the walled city. There was a walled city,
in Cavite.
Portabaga, older than Intramuros. Yes, because the Spanish galleons were being repaired. They built that Portabaga. Nick Joaquin wrote about that, about Portabaga.
That's now.
They destroyed Portabaga after the war because the Philippine Navy wanted the whole place, so they just pushed all the walls into the sea. Unlike Manila, where they tried to rebuild, so it's very sad because the physical structure, of course, disappeared. But the old Caviteños are very, very Hispanized.
Okay.
So that's, alam mo naman si Nick Joaquin was always for the Hispano-Filipino. So my mother belonged to that culture. We and in Cavite was
this is Cavite City now?
Hindi, Cavite City now is the old San Roque. Oo. Dahil kinuha na ng Philippine Navy yung buong Portabaga
Portabaga now is what?
Philippine Navy. So pag pumunta ka doon,
saan po to? Saang bayan?
Doon, sa Cavite. Pupunta ka sa Cavite, tuloy-tuloy ang dulo nung kalye, yung East Coast na tinatawag nila. Ang dulo noon, yun ng Portabaga. Pero wala ka nang makikitang...
Siguro pag nag-dive ka, makikita mo yung mga walls?
Siguro, oo. Ngayon, there was as usual, there was the Virgen de la Soledad, which was the patroness of Portabaga. Now she was brought to San Roque. Yung sinasabi ninyong Cavite City ngayon is San Roque. Oo. And halos wala nang natitira ngayon ng mga old-timers. Ngayon, my family belonged to the old-timer group. So much, my mother was a Cabetas. One of the 13 Martires is a Cabetas. We were very much involved in the Philippine Revolution. Cabezas.
Or boy?
Cabetas.
Parang Cavite.
With a Z. Cabet.
Cabetas.
Zas.
Yeah.
Cabetas, pronounced in Spanish.
Oh.
So, my family was very much involved in the Philippine Revolution. So, I grew up on my lolo's side, very much interested in history and to a certain extent politics.
When you
Because-
say history, you discuss it on the dining table?
Well, I don't like politics but you cannot have history without politics. Now, for example, like what's going on now, I find myself tracking everything that's happening. But I did not take up law. My line is literature and the arts. That's
What brought you to literature and the arts?
well, when I enrolled at UP, I was an English major. Sa UP noon, pag sinabing majoring in English, majoring in literature yon, hindi language teaching. Tsaka my degree, wala na ngayon degree ganun PhD, Bachelor of Philosophy and Letters.
Okay.
Nung araw yon, in pagka PhD ka, that means that you're going to be a writer.
Okay.
Oo. You're not going to be a teacher. You're going to be a writer.
Uh-huh.
Philosophy and letters.
Uh-huh.
But when I was first enrolled at UP, I enrolled in the College of Education. But when I came back to UP after the war, I saw how limited the curriculum was. I wanted to take
That is
up more
why-
literature courses.
That's why you studied
Ayaw na
abroad.
nila. Lumipat ako sa philosophy and letters. So even now, I'm very fond of writing and the humanities. And my interest in, when I took my MA, I went to Stanford University, as you know, which is the greatest university of the West.
Yes.
Stanford, oh yes.
Even up to now.
Even now, yes. That's why President Clinton was very proud when his daughter was admitted.
Kasi
Very
it's hard.
difficult to get into Stanford. But if you are interested in study abroad, you are a writer, you should try your very
Wow.
best to go to
My
Stanford.
professor went there, Jess Cruz. I don't know if you know Jess Cruz.
Yes.
Cruz. He passed
Jesus.
away just
Jesus.
Cruz. He passed away just a month ago, 2 months ago.
Where did you graduate from?
FEU.
FEU.
University
Ang
of-
tropa ko naman doon, sina Nick Agudo,
Ayan.
sina,
University of
in fact, marami doon. Far Eastern was quite a center because Nick Joaquin
During
was
the
there
1950s.
with his brother Ike.
Yeah.
Sarah Joaquin was
Sarah.
also there. And
This was in the 50s, ma'am?
yes, in the
50s
50s. But UP has always remained strong in the Amador Daggio and I were together at Stanford, and Len Casper, if you know Len Casper.
That's the
He's the American who specializes in Philippine literature.
Leonardo
Len, yes, Leonardo
Casper.
Casper. He got married to a Filipina. Oo, si Linda T.
Yeah.
Oo. I was behind that romance
Oh, really?
Oo. Kasama ako sa
Matchmaker.
pagluluto ng romance noon. Kasi yung mother noon, yung mother ni Linda, tsaka ako magkasama sa Stanford. Pinakilala ko si off the record yan pinakilala ko yung si Catalina ang pangalan ng mother niya. Si Taling. No? Pinakilala ko kay Len. Si Len, magkatabi lang kami ng dormitory. Binata pa si Len, syempre. And Len was teaching me how to drive.
Okay.
Because I learned to drive in Stanford. And sabi ni Taling, naku, sana ganyan ang mapangasawa ng anak ko. Ngayon, nakakuha naman si Len ng Fulbright professorship. Kaya nakarating dito. Ganun ang nagkakatuloy na sila. At saka si Linda pala talagang writer din because she has written so many novels. But you must go to Stanford. Stanford is a very big name in literature. Wallace Stegner, the famous Wallace Stegner was, pero wala na ngayon, pero hindi ko lang. Stanford is good in anything all around. It's number 1 in medicine, number 1 in physics. Marami siyang professors na Nobel Prize winners. Oo, number one in yun nga, literature. And of course, I took my speech and drama there. Doon ako nagtapos ng ano.
Pero yung literature po sa
UP muna, oo. Then after 2 years teaching here, I went to on my own kasi Fulbright Foundation did not want to give me a scholarship. I was going to get a scholarship, but they wanted me to major in English. And I said, no, I want to go beyond English, not English but speech and drama noon. Eh, wala pang field in speech and drama in 1951. Wala pa yon, no? So I told Mother, you see how my husband was a very generous man, and I think that was his American side. He comes from the father comes from Texas, and the Texans are very well. They have I think they have a habit of being very what's the word? Sometimes very well. They want to do things big. Ganon ang mind ng mga Texans. And when I see Bush move around, he's really very Texan, and very direct. Now, my husband always, he wasn't at all a penny pincher kind of man. He was very generous, although he didn't have much. But he was very fond of sharing whatever he had. So when I said, do you think you can send me to Stanford? It meant really tightening his belt because he was going to have to support me, and Stanford is a very expensive school.
Back then he
was already a young
colonel.
No, he was only a first lieutenant.
Okay.
Because when we got married, he was, believe it or not, he was second lieutenant. During the war, meron pang rangkong third lieutenant. Ngayon wala na yung third lieutenant eh. But after the war, the third lieutenant is a white bar. The second lieutenant is a yellow bar. Then when you become captain, it becomes 2 bars.
Okay. Ma'am, during the war, saan po kayo nagstay nun? No 5 years na yun, 4 years?
We had there are so many unique things in my life total. We lived in the only steel house in the country. You know what a steel house is? Do you know San Sebastian Church?
Yeah.
Okay, San Sebastian is made out of completely steel. Now, in the 30s, a German company came to the Philippines and showed the model of a steel house. It was very expensive, but my father and mother decided they wanted a steel house. So they bought the 2-bedroom steel house, and it's still there on dun sa Calle. It's here in Vito Cruz. Because the Japanese tried to burn that steel house down, but they couldn't because it is made of steel. But my mother made the mistake of selling
technology.
Yes, it was fireproof, earthquake-proof, lightning-proof. It was really like a battleship eh. And I remember as a child, people would come and visit us just to look at that steel house because it was there.
Still there?
It's still there.
Corner,
it's still there.
Vito Cruz corner.
No, doon sa Vito Cruz, and it's on it used to be called Fuentes, but now it's Aquino.
Aquino Street.
And di mo makikilala kasi I tried. In fact, I was thinking of buying that back. No. My mother sold it because during that time, during the war, you know yung Calle Sobel ngayon, yun eh, that was an air base of the Japanese. That was Nilsson Airport. So the Japanese pilots and airplanes were on that area. Now, my mother said that there was a dog fight. You know what a dog fight is? The airplane is fighting up there. And an airplane fell on the vacant lot in front of that house. Kasi noong araw wala pang bahay yun eh, puro bukid yun eh. Oo, rice field. So my mother was so frightened.
Wala kayong kapitbahay nun?
Wala pa noon. My mother was so frightened because the boot of the pilot fell into our veranda. How
I mean, boot with the feet?
With the leg.
With the leg.
So, I'm telling you, I was not there because during that time, here is another part of my life which is interesting. I went to St. Luke's and enrolled I went to nursing school to find out how tough I could be because I had 3 years of college. But I was not doing anything, so I said, I went to visit my cousin who was in...
St. Luke's na pala.
Ang St. Luke's no, nasa Bambang.
Bambang pa.
Wala pa yung malaki St. Luke's. It was a small hospital, but supposed to be the cleanest and the most efficient, ideal hospital on Bambang Street. Yes, during the war. And it was run by the Japanese because the Japanese took over. There's a St. Luke's in Tokyo. When the war broke out, they imprisoned all of the American nurses.
Wow.
And then the Tokyo nurses came to Manila and took over the St. Luke's Hospital. So it just happened on a hunch that I saw my cousin, and then I said to myself, what if I went into nursing school and found out how tough I was? Because I was the kind of girl who didn't know how to work. I mean, yung marurumi, no? And I didn't know how to look at blood and, face...
How was the Crame household?
My mother didn't know that I went... I told her after I was inside already that I was...
How many months?
I spent a year there.
Anong year ito?
That was 1944.
Medyo settled na yung...
No, that was the time when the Japanese were winning. No, so they were kinder. But in 1944 September, MacArthur started coming back and made the landing in Leyte. And then they started bombing Manila. And but they didn't bomb. Well, it was the Americans, the PGH did not have anything. Wala silang medicine, wala silang gamit. But somehow St. Luke's had, because the Japanese were running it. So all of the injured and the dead were all brought to St. Luke's. So I really was confronted with all of this ugliness of...
Doon naman kayo nag-aral ng yung
ng nursing.
Parang crash course.
Hindi crash course. Talagang, I was first year. Wala pang cap.
Okay.
Pero nung panahon na yon, talagang kasi natakot lahat ng mga nurses, yung mga RN, yung mga the professional nurses, all left for the province. Naiwan sa estudyante ang mga ang hospital.
Ang teacher niyo po is mga Pilipino?
Hindi, Japanese.
How do you communicate? How did you communicate?
They spoke English. These were Japanese nurses in Tokyo. And remember that St. Luke's is an American hospital. So the Japanese nurses in Tokyo were Americanized.
So most of the patients were Japanese?
No, Filipinos.
Guerrillas.
So that's where I got all my nursing training, and that is probably also why I was chosen one of the 6 when it came to Palo. Because I not only had high educational qualifications, and of course I was physically okay, but that I had nursing training. I think that was part of it.
Wala akong nanligaw sa inyo, Japanese.
Ay, oo, marami. Marami din.
How did you...
How I handled? Ay, naku, mahirap na yon. But I spoke a little, I went to school. There was there were classes, in Nihongo classes, and it saved our lives because I learned polite Nihongo. So, alam mo, in every corner halos there were Japanese sentries, and they were very cruel. And you would have, when you pass by a sentry, you always bowed. No? Kung hindi, matatampal ka o baka patayin ka pa. No? Kasi naka-fix bayonet yun talaga yung mga, oo. And, but I usually would bow, and then I would say something like the very polite form of good morning or good afternoon, ganon. And they react when they see that when you talk to them very politely, then they become kinder. And I think in many cases that saved my father was caught and brought to Fort Santiago and imprisoned in Santiago. On the I don't know how it was. He had my father is an artist. You know, he's a jazz pianist.
Okay.
He is a very famous, one of the famous Ramon Crame.
And your mother was a housewife?
My mother was a teacher
in
the famous San Andres Elementary School, which is now Maria Aurora, Quezon. Before the war, San Andres Elementary School was supposed to be number 1 among the elementary schools. They had also, my mother belonged to PNS, you know, yung mga sa Philippine Normal School kasi yung classes from when the time it began from 901 to 1920, these were all the most the most distinguished women in our country at the time. Because her name was Expectacion Cabezas. She belongs to PNS class 1914.
1914.
The mother of President Ramos, Josefa Edralin, was class 1916. So she was 2 years younger. And the parents also of Senator Helen Benitez also were all in the PNS. Yan ang story ng PNS eh. Hindi lang nyo alam kasi ngayon PNC and PNU belong to the
that's the same building.
To the lower classes Pero during the beginning of the American occupation, PNS was something like Harvard
really?
At the time.
Saan po ito located?
Hindi ba nandun sa Taft Avenue?
Yung pa rin yun?
Yun, the same building.
Yung PNU ngayon.
PNS yun, 1901. And then in 1950, naging PNC, Philippine Normal College. And then about, 1990 yata, naging university. But traditionally, it's always the school for the common people. Pero nung panahon nung 1901 hanggang 1920, yung panahon na yon, it was the only school available. The only, in fact, the UP started in 1908. So all of the Filipinos who intended to go to higher education, they were all at PNS.
Okay.
Pagkatapos nung na-establish na yung ang UP, nagkaroon na ng College of Law, College of Medicine, College of Engineering. Lumipat na ngayon yung mga hindi na magti-teacher, hindi na mag-education, lumipat na ngayon sa Padre Faura. Dahil yun ang UP.
How many are you in the... Alam po yung kapatid niyo?
5. All girls.
You're
all girls.
You're pang ilan po?
Panganay.
Yes.
That's probably why I'm also a go-getter. Because sabi nila yung mga panganay talagang strong, you know, well, I guess even as a child, I knew I had to lead. And I've always blazed a trail. My going to Stanford for speech and drama was a trailblazing thing, because when I came back, I was probably the only one or two. There was another one what's her name? Laurel. Pero I don't know what happened to her, wala man nangyari. Pero ako, from the very beginning, talagang I knew I wanted to use theater, drama and theater, to spearhead the development of our people. I felt that in education, teachers ought to be strong in the techniques, at least, of speech and drama, so that they could be more effective in teaching their students. So, when I joined PNC in 1953, that was because Severino Montano had come back. As you know, yung Arena Theater na yun. Montano had come, ito nga pala, sa'yo pala ito. You're the
only theater person in the family?
Oo, who majored in. Kasi wala namang yung speech and drama sa abroad lang noon. UP started speech and drama in 1960. What we had started in Montano built set up the graduate program in 1953. I was able to set up the undergraduate program in 1974. So that was part of my trailblazing efforts. But I didn't stop there. I wanted to see the teachers coming out into the field. So I set up the Philippine Drama Company. That's Mr. C. Roger was there in the sala. I'll take you to the sala, where this house was built. I designed it myself, so that in my old age, I could turn it into a theater, and it is now a theater. That's how I was it. Kasi alam na alam ko what I wanted to do, and my husband was with me all the way. He was my perfect stage Johnny, and when he retired, I trained him to become an actor himself.
Okay.
So he
ano yung first role niya? Ano po yung first role niya?
Well, he was introduced by Rolando Tinio in Caligula. Teatro Filipino.
Teatro Filipino.
And he played the role of Cassius.
Okay.
Then he also played in The Good Woman of Sichuan.
As
well, he was the priest there.
Okay.
Small roles.
Okay.
But slowly he experienced professional theater. But here, he played Don Aristeo, which is a very big role in Portrait of the Artist as Filipino, which is our...
this is the movie or the play?
You know about the movie?
I saw the movie, ma'am.
You saw the movie?
Yeah.
You saw me?
Yeah, of course, ma'am.
Oh my gosh, you're lucky. Where did you see it?
One of those film festivals.
Really?
Probably 4 years
Kasi
ago.
very rare yun eh. Nobody, in fact,
black and white.
Yes, and nobody has a copy of it. Ako meron. Oo. What I plan to do is I want to take it to make it a CD. Kasi nga baka masira. And I think that is the biggest, the thing that gives me such great pride to hear people say to me now that they saw, like you did, that they saw that film and they think that I was good.
Of course naman, ma'am.
Well, that's the beauty of film, because it with live theater, you can be very good, but you're only part of a memory.
Okay.
So, but if it is on film, then your work will be there forever, I hope. But I'm very, very fortunate in my theater work because I have played very memorable roles. Like, as I said, I did this to you. This is Leonor Rivera.
When was the first role?
This is when I began to become known because Leonor Rivera was written by Montano, and then ayun nga, I played it for 10 years, no?
Okay.
And this was taken in action.
Saan pong theater siya?
Sa Dagupan to. Ganyan din.
Dagupan.
Kasi nung sa Arena Theater kami, we perform anywhere.
Mobile
any
theater.
space available. Kaya ako, I have been geared to that idea that kunin mo na ito. Hindi mo na minarka ko na yan. No?
Ay, okay. Si Belino Montano, siya po yung taga
He's national artist now. Ito nga lumabas dito sa ano eh. Pero matagal na sa magazine. Ito.
Ma'am, naisip niyo talagang magiging actress kayo nung time na yun, nung bata pa kayo, o?
Yes, I wanted to be an actress, but I wanted to be a scholar also. I mean, I didn't believe in, I didn't like, well, I suppose I should look down on show business because my aunt is a famous name in show business. Milagros Crame is Lupita, the famous comedian. She's the sister of my father.
Milagros Crame.
So when
Lupita?
Lupita,
Yun yung parang
she was one of the
niya.
first vaudeville actresses.
Okay.
But she was also considered the black sheep in the family, because she ran away. When ganun ang story, and my mother threatened me when she saw me growing up, nakikita niyang mahilig, and she told me that she would cut me in half if I ever became an actress. But she didn't know that my plan was not just to run away and join showbiz. I really wanted to go to college.
Back then, when you say showbiz, that's theater, the vaudeville.
No, showbiz is different from theater. Pag sinabi mo theater, you're talking about the art.
Okay.
Work of art.
Yung showbiz nung time na yun.
Entertainment.
Yung vaudeville.
The American vaudeville, the Salsuela, the
Hindi.
Moro-Moro, the...
Yung kay Don.
Lahat yan. Ngayon, pumasok ang television, the showbiz lahat yan. That's where the money is, of course. But, my aunt was a very bright person. She was also a writer.
Milagros?
Yan, si Milagros. But at her time, this was around siguro mga 1920, ganon. There was no other alternative if you wanted to become an artist, but become vaudeville. Vaudeville. And she became very famous. Sila kasi na Cathy de la Cruz. If you read the history of early vaudeville, you hear her name there. In fact, nobody knew that she was a Crame because her name was Millie Sparks. Millie Sparks. M-I-L-L-I-E. And then Millie.
M.
And then her family name, stage name yan, Sparks.
As in Spark.
Sparks. And then during the war, she was one of the stars of the troupe of Bert Avellana. Kasi, ewan ko kung alam mo, during the war, walang pelikula, no? Nabuhay ang live stage. Hindi vaudeville, ang tawag nila stage show. So lahat ng sinehan, they all had their own stage troupe. Like the father of FPJ, si Fernando Po, nasa State Theater.
State Theater.
Pero si Avellana, nasa Avenue Theater.
Sa ano ito, Escolta?
Hindi, ang Avenue Theater nasa kanto ng Ascaraga at saka Claro M. Recto and Avenida Rizal.
Okay.
And it was the biggest one. Yun ang, of all of the theaters, Avenue Theater
Label.
was the most classy.
Okay.
No? Then sina
Silang
yung mga
Berto,
yung sina pangalan nito
FPJ,
yung yung mga komikero
Sina
nasa
Togo,
live.
Sino ba
Si-
to? Togo and Pogo.
Tugo and Pogo, nasa Live Theater yon.
Sa
Ang Live Theater sa tabi,
Quiapo.
sa likod ng Quiapo.
Buhay
Quiapo
pa rin
Church.
siya. Buhay pa rin siya.
Ang Live
Oh,
Theater, buhay pa?
But it's not a theater anymore. It's parang maliit na mall or
Oo.
something.
So yan ang mga
Matindi.
you know, it would be interesting if you go,
Tatlo.
if you study abroad to, to do research on the status of the performing arts during the Japanese time. Kasi nobody has
Talaga?
written about ito. We sometimes, the Avellanas call it the golden age.
Oh, why?
Oo. Kasi nga,
walang
when the movies disappeared,
Oh.
it was a very big impetus to live theater.
Sino nanonood, ma'am, ng Japanese din?
Doon, punong-puno ang
Okay.
lahat ng Filipinos. And then, of course, maraming si Togo at Pogo, maraming kalukuhan, yung yung they say things that were satires
Ah,
on the
sa
Japanese.
Japanese.
Oo.
Hindi
So pag
nila-
nalaman ng Japanese yun, because the Japanese officers sometimes came to see it, eh di huli lahat yan, yung mga yan, sasara ngayon yung very dangerous
Togo
na
and
panahon na yun,
Pogo.
pero ang saya-saya kasi the theaters were all live performances.
How much do you pay then per show?
I would not
One
remember.
centavo na
I would not remember. I did not go.
Ay.
I'm a little snobbish also. I did
But
not
you
like to
did.
go to vaudeville, although I was very much influenced because as a little girl, my lola would smuggle me out of my home during the weekend, and she would bring me to Savoy Theater.
Where's
Savoy
Savoy?
was famous. It was in Santa Cruz. Andun doon na the best vaudeville. Siguro mga 1930 yun. Yung panahon na yun.
1930.
Oo. So,
How old were you then?
I was probably about 8 years old. So
okay.
I saw so much of the life backstage, and maybe that's also part of my love
Nagkaroon
for
kayo
the
ng-
theater. Oo.
Sinong auntie to?
Yun nga, si Millie
Sila-
Sparks. Oo,
okay.
who was very...
Ma'am, paano ang show nun? What time nag-start yung
it started in the
Usually.
late afternoon,
Okay.
and it went on till midnight.
Oh, midnight.
And then there were, at the time, my father used to tell me, my father was a young man, and he was,
Where did he play?
kasi my father's family came from Bacolod. Now, itong kraming ito, we're very much in the arts. My lolo, Jose, was an asendero. But he did not like the idea of being a landowner. He wanted to write. So he left the hacienda to his sister and tried his luck in Manila, and he became the editor of a Spanish newspaper kasi there's Spanish ganon. Meanwhile, his children, my lola naman was stayed at home, but she played the piano, so she taught piano. So I grew up in that circumstance. Then one son became a famous violinist, but he died when he was young. My uncle Miling, Emiliano Crame, died when he was 21. And then the next one was Milagros. Yan nga, yung nagtanan, became Millie Sparks.
Anong age na nagtanan?
Siguro mga 17, 18, gano'n.
You mean umalis sa bahay? Pero
She
with a
joined
man?
a troupe.
Okay.
At the time,
But
I
not with a
remember,
man.
I remember that there were some, my mother used to say that there were already the beginnings of organizations that toured Southeast Asia. Filipinos, who were touring Southeast Asia, and and doing performances. So in the same manner that we go out now and tour our place, we had vaudeville troops that were barnstorming Southeast Asia, because I remember seeing my aunt bringing back very many batik at saka ganyang mga Indonesian decor. And I was only 8 years old then. So I knew that she had been out of the country.
What's the name of the group?
Hindi ko alam. Pero she was doing that. So,
Dolphy did that daw eh.
Ganon, oo.
Sa Japan for a time.
Oo, but he's young compared
Younger,
to... My aunt died in 1952 eh.
Okay.
She died already. But there is supposed to be a Hall of Fame for early, kasama doon sina Gregorio Tikman, yung kasama ang si Millie Sparks doon, Milagros Crame, kaya mabuti pa siya eh, dahil nasa Hall of Fame siya, ako hindi. But she was, I remember she was not stupid like the other, showbiz people, because whenever she had time, she wrote novels.
Oh, okay.
So she was a writer also. And then I remember that when I was leaving for Stanford, she came, after the war, she became a good woman in the sense that she married a very decent engineer who became, in fact, governor of Laguna for a while. After the war kasi may mga ganun eh. And she
had children?
No, she had no children. The man was much younger than she was.
She married in her 30s?
She must have married in her 40s already.
Okay.
But the young man was, belonged to a well-known family, Bautista. The father of, what's his name, I forgot, kasi namatay na rin eh. But the father of my aunt's husband is the one who built Rizal Memorial Stadium. Kaya famous architect, engineer. But this fellow also, in our family, off the record, we were saying that si Titong was his name. He was only after my aunt's money. Kasi maraming naipon ng antimili.
Yung kaiikot niya ng...
Hindi lang yun, artista siya eh. They make good money.
That time.
So, when my aunt passed away, para bang everything disappeared. But
he took the money? Took away the money?
I don't know. Basta no trace of anything was left, even her jewelry. She had a lot of jewelry.
She died at what age? 50s?
Siguro mga 70s.
She lived a full life.
Yes, she did.
Okay.
But she was quite a person, and she looked like she was so. What impressed me was she was like a Hollywood star. No, she was like Joan Crawford. Joan Crawford.
Yeah, I saw her picture.
The way the early Hollywood stars like Joan Crawford, Betty Davis, Norma Shearer, they were always perfectly dressed. Pati underwear. Terno lahat yun. Ganun siya. Yung auntie ko yun. Because I know as a child, I would come into her room, Because there was a time when she lived with us in a big house on Singalong.
Another house na
before the war.
Before
Hindi pa namin nabibili yung steel house. Maliit pa ako eh. Siguro mga 5, 6, 7 years old. I would just sneak into her room and just look around, because it was so interesting to see her collection and then her clothes. Ganda.
Ano pa yung mga clothes na yun?
Mukhang Hollywood talaga. Dahil terno lato. Ngayon hindi na eh. Pero in those days, during the days of glamour of Hollywood, the Hollywood stars, the leading Hollywood stars, particularly Joan Crawford, was famous for her for her fashion. And and everything matched, including her lingerie, all of that we're all matched. And
So you wore your auntie's clothes? You tried them on?
no, well,
Or
I
just-
tried her shoes.
Why the
Yeah.
shoes?
Well, her shoes were also, she's.
But you were young then pala, no? Like
I was a little, but you would
girl,
play.
yeah.
You would play. Wala naman siya, nag-rehearse siya eh. So,
Is she the kind of one who smokes? And,
yes, she smoked a lot.
okay. Drink
Oo.
martinis.
Yes. Yung ganyan, nakikita mo yung mga the stain,
Here.
mga ganon-ganon, yung panahon na yun, Glad Mad 20s, don't forget, that's the era of the Glad Mad 20s. Glad Mad 20s.
Yeah, that's the term.
Fitzgerald, you read Fitzgerald?
No, I haven't.
You read the works of Fitzgerald and you will...
The Great Gatsby, which
Yes,
one?
The Great Gatsby, yung panahon na yan,
Jazz Age.
Yes,
Glad
oo.
Mad 20s.
They were, that's the era, it's called Glad Mad 20s, and
So.
she belonged to that era.
Okay.
And that was also at the height of vaudeville here in the Philippines. People tell me now that sometimes I remember reading an article on early vaudeville and somebody had come across Millie Sparks, and Millie Sparks was supposed to have the most beautiful legs
Okay.
in among the
Marlene,
the women
title.
associated with vaudeville. Oo. Ganun. But very exciting years.
You were
I guess.
half Spanish ba? The Cramis are half Spanish.
The Kramis are Spanish. Yes.
Pure.
No.
Half Pinay.
Well, they were married Filipina women.
Okay.
So both cabezas was the same thing, and the Kramis are the same. They are all insulares. You remember, they all lived in Intramuros.
Yeah, okay.
And then when they got married, I don't know how they met their Filipino wives. But my lola, the Cabeza side, comes from Kawit. And Kawit was Cavite Viejo.
Yeah,
Oh,
okay.
that's the name of Kawit. And my mother became very close to the Aguinaldos. So Carmen Aguinaldo, the daughter of General Emilio Aguinaldo, is my godmother sa Binyag. And as a little girl, I used to play doon sa bahay ni Lolo Emilio.
You have vivid memories of that.
Yes. So I said my life really is so colorful because the people that I met and grew up with and who made influence in my life are all very important Filipinos. So I look at, for example, General Emilio Aguinaldo now. His statue is in Aguinaldo.
You saw him.
Ay,
when he was-
kasi
how was he?
Ha?
How was he during those times?
Well,
Is he
yung
strict?
cut, yung kanyang cut, yung Aguinaldo haircut, ganun talaga.
Pero he was strict.
Oo.
Was he-
Naalala ko yun nung maliit kami kasi yung mga anak ng ninang, and that's Justice Amorfina Melencio, retired na ngayon. We used to play together as children. And my mother used to bring us to Kawit doon and play in the Kawit house. And then, di ba may tower doon sa taas? Pumapanik kami doon, pinagagalitan kami ng Lolo Emilio na huwag kayo papanik dyan dahil baka kayo mahulog. So I remember seeing him face to face. Then of course my ninang has also passed away. But these people all gave me so much influence in my life. I think children need that. That's why I was very proud of my noble heritage. My grandparents, my godparents, my parents, and I always felt that I must blaze a trail in my life, and at the end of my life be able to say that I did something for the country. That's very strong in me. In other words, I don't know what it is, but I think it's very important to grow up feeling that you are a patriot. And up to now, I'm still talking to teachers, even if I'm retired. I said, the trouble with the curriculum is they do not emphasize models of patriotism for the children. Because I think if you are 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, and you read stories of great Filipinos and great Filipinas, somewhere along the line you will feel that here is the model and I want to be like that. Ganon yun eh. So to me, because I remember when I was in grade 3, grade 4, there were books, and strangely enough, they were not even Filipinos. They were American heroes like Booker T. Washington, Charles Lindbergh, and most of them were men. But, you know, it really made a strong impression that one can be great in his own way. You know? So, I kind of, and I never lost hope even during the Japanese time. Now, the World War II really broke our lives eh. But somehow I held on and I knew that we would be able to get out of it, and then the miracle happened when I met my husband, because that's the one that changed my life. Because when we got married, he too, his life had been destroyed because of his American lineage. Their home had been confiscated by the Japanese. His father was dying because he was dying of starvation. They went back to their home, but the home was a shell because the Japanese had destroyed the house and left only the pillars. But I think I felt that as long as you found the person that you love, that I think that was very important, and we both hung on to each other, and the first thing he wanted me to do was to send me back to school. So I owe it to him. If he had not been for this young Lieutenant Rogers, I would not be back at UP. And he helped me, really helped me, kasi I did not know how to study anymore, you know.
Oh.
Hirap eh.
After 7 years.
So he would wake me up at he would let me sleep. Kasi noon we lived in Cavite because that's where their home was, and we had an old jeep, and he would drive me to,
the way to
Padre
UP?
Faura, yes.
How
And UP
long?
was,
How long?
siguro mga 2 hours, 3 hours
kasi
yun,
rough road.
na rough road. And then he would go to work. He was assigned at Villamor, at Nichols Air Base pa noon, Nichols, so hindi pa Villamor. Nichols, dyan siya assigned. After he worked, he would come and pick me up, and we would go home, and we would both be very, very tired. And then he would let me sleep, but he would make me up at 1 o'clock in the morning to study. At kasama siya, natutulog siya, nakaganyan ako nag-aaral hanggang nakatapos. Kung hindi sa kanya talagang ano. My sister did not finish, you know, she was also at UP. But
What
she
course?
did not, she was taking, she was a swimmer, a varsity swimmer, Thelma. And she was a major in physical education. And she was very, also a sponsor.
Ano po yung professional for siblings nyo?
Ang alin?
Yung pong 4 na kapatid yung sumunod.
Kaming dalawa ni Thelma ang nasa UP. Yung mga bunso, kawawa yun kasi yun eh, naging mga war babe, mga war children eh. So,
traumatized.
We were all very poor after the war. And my 2 sisters went to PWU.
Naging teacher sila?
Doon nakatapos pero...
Teacher po?
No, one was in architecture. UST. She finished. Olivia became the first lady's landscaper. She was the one who landscaped the National Art Center and the home of the Marcoses in Tolosa. She was. Pero kamamatay lang ng sister ko si Olivia. She's very well known in her field, Olivia Crame. And then the other sister, Celia, became a businesswoman.
What business?
She goes into, you know, in all kinds of business.
They married? They were all married?
No, Olivia remained single.
Okay.
Celia became Celia Rojas. And the
Merida.
youngest sister, yun ang pinakakawawa sa lahat dahil yun ang 11 years old din during the war. Talagang naghirap siya.
What's her
But
name?
she met a young Navy officer. So she married an American. And she's now Mrs. O'Keefe. And she lives in the United States.
Okay. Si
Yun ang
Thelma
nangyari.
po. Yung
Si Thelma namatay din.
during, no,
She
married.
died. Oh yes, she's Thelma Alvarez.
Not related to the senator.
Hindi.
yeah.
Oh. So, well, of all of the sisters, probably I was the one that was driven by this passion for
Performing.
trailblazing.
Trailblazing,
Oo. And well, I guess I inherited that also from my mother because she was also the oldest. And my mother regaled me with stories of brave women who were her friends. For example, like Olivia Salamanca. Olivia Salamanca was the first. It's called the Florence Nightingale of the Philippines.
The first nurse.
She's from Cavite.
Since she studied nursing and then...
Well, somehow the women in Cavite were also very very strong women,
Yeah.
like the Tironas, yung mga Tirona, they are the founders of Philippine women's at Cavite yan, mga Caviteñas yan, from sa loob, pag sinabing sa loob, coming from the walled city. These are very famous families that were involved in the revolution, yes. That's why, I don't know, Cavite really was the cradle of, revolutionary ideas. And they were the ones who yung pa pala is a total very nice. When I was a little girl, isa pa yon, I always look forward to the evenings because in the evening there would be storytelling by my grandparents. Well, my grandmother was a prinsesa ng Moro-Moro.
what's her name?
That means she's an actress. The Moro-Moro is our traditional form of theater. And she knew all of this by heart. These are the metrical romances,
Wow.
Yung mga Principe Baldovino, Florante at Laura, Siete Pares. And strangely enough, I did not know that we had Filipino translations of King Arthur, for example.
Who translated?
Alam niya eh. She would recite it to me.
What's her name, ma'am?
Lazara Bernal. Capital Lazara.
Lazara Bernal.
She said to me that in her day, if you are literate, if you know how to read and write, then you can join the Moro-Moro troupe. So she was a princesa ng Moro-Moro because she knew how to read and write. And many of her, siguro this was mga 1800 something, the boys in the barrio would come to her and ask her to write letters for their lady loves. So at night, I was regaled with stories of the great literature, even the Cid, Le Cid, was also, she would tell me the story of Le Cid in she recited it she knew it by heart and it was always a one-man show kasi nag-ano siya, nag-eskrima siya dyan, siya lahat yun,
Parang Lola Passion.
parang ganon, but live, kumisan nga namamalansya siya, kumisan nasusunog ang plancha dahil she's so busy acting it out for me. Ngayon, so I would be with her on certain nights. On other nights, I would be with my lolo. And my lolo... Lolo Ipi, the Cabezas.
Parang the Cabezas.
The Cabezas. And he would tell me the story of the revolution. So, lahat yung mga...
A general? No, no.
No, no,
Is it
you're talking about Rafael Crame. I'm talking about Cabezas.
yeah. So he was during the
revolution.
He was
very much involved in the Cavite
yung
revolution.
Magdalo.
Hindi, yung kina Aguinaldo.
Oo.
Yung Magdalo, yung sinasamo, that group. Kaya siya nagkwento sa akin nung discovery of the Katipunan eh. Kaya maliit pa ako, alam ko na Katipunan was discovered through the confessional. At my family, Felipe Cabezas.
Felipe Cabezas, okay.
My family hated the friars very much. And so in Cavite, many of them turned to Aglipayan. They became Aglipay. And my grandfather was very much involved in masonry. So, yun, I grew up like that, listening to stories of history from my lolo and stories of metrical romances from my lola. I'm very rich when I think of it, how rich my childhood was because my grandparents were around and they told me they really enriched my mind so much with the history, culture, and the arts.
Your father was a jazz pianist. He played at the house, ba?
Yes, he was in the Manila Hotel.
Oh, yeah.
That's his work. He was the featured pianist of the famous Manila Hotel Orchestra from 1930. This is Quezon, kaya he knew he was very close to General MacArthur, Quezon, because the Manila Hotel was like the CCP now. Doon nag-iipon lahat ng ang society, all the elite, where they were all in Manila Hotel. They would always be in Manila Hotel. But before that, what I marveled at was in 1922, my father, who was only 21 years old, was already the band leader of the great Empress boats. These boats are parang love boats, yung malalaking boats before. There was an Empress of Japan, Empress of Canada, Empress of Russia boats, and my father just moved from one ship to the other and was band leader for those ships. So, but in 1930, pinuntahan siya ni Tirso Cruz and invited him, and asked him to give up his band leadership and to join him in Manila Hotel. So, if
Tirso Cruz,
the famous ano ba yung jazz concert
1950s?
1930.
1930s,
Oh, 1930 yun. Oh.
Very much alive ang jazz.
Yes, he was
Molina, ito yung started si Tony Molina. Ito younger.
Very very much younger. Isa pa yan, they have not that time has not been researched. Now we are all very jazz enthusiasts, but nobody has gone into some kind of research to find out how it started and who were outstanding musicians. My father went to the conservatory only for hindi siya nakatapos kasi he was able to get that job as band leader in the Empress boats. But he was earning a fabulous salary before the war as a featured pianist of Tirso Cruz. And my father was very handsome. He was called there was a famous pianist in America by the name of Lee Sims, capital Leesims, whose hobby was automotive repair. My father was like that. He liked to tinker with the automobile, when he was off. So there was a feature in the newspaper calling him the Lee Sims of the Philippines. But course,
Pero
wala na yon. Pero I do
wala
not
pang
know if
recording.
kung meron pa kayong morgue na mga papers before the war. Wala na talaga. But I remember that my father was Lee Sims of the Philippines. And my father was the one who played Rhapsody in Blue for the
Wow.
first time in Manila Hotel. So he played that.
Pero sa house ni ma'am, pag Sunday or afternoon, you hear him play.
Yes.
Every
This
morning.
house was filled with music.
This
Oo.
house?
Yeah. Ngayon na lamang talagang
Oh.
nawala na silang lahat. I even gave my piano, I also played the piano, but I gave my piano away already to my nephew. Kasi, well, para ma-inspire naman yung mga bata na. And in fact, I was there yesterday and
Saan po?
they live in Antipolo, yung
Ah.
sister ko. Yung anak niya itong pinigbihan ko ng piano. And I brought the picture of my father. And I said, oh, ayan ang lolo mo at the piano. And I hope that the child is about 9 years old, 10 years old. I hope, little
May
things
influence
like
siya.
that might inspire them. I don't know, Totel, ikaw ba gano'n? Do you feel like that? How do you feel about what I'm telling you? Do you think as a child, I don't know about your childhood, but do you think that
Mamumold sila,
your own in your family, did you look up to somebody in your family, ganon? Why did you join the press?
I was fascinated with Ninoy's life. I was reading his biography during the 1980s. When the height of the revolution.
How young were you then?
10, 12 years old.
You must be very young. How old are you now?
32. I'm already 32.
Married?
No.
You're the age of my husband when I married him, 32. Well, iba na kasi kayo ng panahon I would
How do
say.
you compare the theater then and now?
When?
During after the war.
I was not in the theater before
After
the
the
war.
war.
After the war, I joined, when I went back to UP, UP transferred to Diliman. This came from San Francisco because Brecht was being shown in the United States for the first time in 1953. 1952 performance yan 1952. So the press came to cover it. And then, of course, lumabas sa press the next day, singling out the people who did well. They thought naman the critic, and nung pangalan ko. Di syempre, proud naman ako, no? And to think that they did not even know I was a foreign student. They thought they thought I was just typical American student there because of the Rogers. But I'll never forget.
The role you played there was...
I played the good woman herself.
Okay.
No, the good woman of Sichuan is about a prostitute. And her name is Shante. Ashente. But the turning point in the story is brought about by a good woman. But because everybody in that play becomes bad because of poverty.
Okay.
There's only one good woman there, and that's a very small role, pero it's becomes I'd say dynamic to the development of the story, because that good woman has remained good in spite of the poorness. She has held on to values of kindness, charity. Pero the whole story revolves around the fact that the style of Brecht is very different from what we call psychological realism, which is the style of that we are used today. Oh yes, when we talk about Portrait of the Artist, talk about Leonor Rivera, talk about any play. Of course, there are snatches of I've seen at the CCP, some of our people are already writing Brecht style. Pero, ang malungkot kasi, there's so much gimmickry of sex.
Ayan, shadow
Oo.
na yung emphasize.
For example, the last, I cannot even remember the name of the play, I don't bother. Pero I went to see a play, and there was complete frontal nudity.
What do you see?
I don't know, I don't even want
Gay, you know? About gay?
No, well, it was about people and how they become, how bad they are because there's always corruption, sex, and all that. Pero
Well, saan ma'am to?
doon sa Matute, doon pa naman sa Matute when the acting is only at your knees.
Kailan po
It's-
to?
Tagal na siguro mga about almost a year ago. Pero
May frontal. Teka,
I was siguro baka maalala mo, pero I was so upset, but I said, well, maybe the audience today has become so hardened that they do not flinch at anything like that. Ito, talagang the girl stood there in front of you, and then they, alam ko frontal nudity, pinatay lang nila yung ilaw. Pero kitang-kita mo rin kasi doon sa harap. Tapos meron pang isang eksenang pinakita na the man comes home, and the first thing he does is to fall upon the maid and then do it
Mass. Efshanil's
Mass.
yeah.
MASS.
Yeah, that's the
Sino
one.
ba yan?
the
Sino
play-
susulat niyan?
It came from the novel of Efshanil Jose, titled Mass.
Oo.
About the revolution.
Now I remember, and I said,
This was
siguro naman si Frankie, hindi naman ganun sa libro
30
yan.
this year lang po yun, February yata. I don't know.
Ewan ko nga ba. Pero
February.
sabi ko, kung ganyan naman to me, it's gimmickry. Kasi people come. Kaya napupuno,
Because
hindi
of
dahil kay Shoni Jose, kung
because
hindi
of
dahil sa
community.
di mabuti pang basahin mo na yung kung talagang ka. Read he's an artist, he's a national artist in literature. So read his literature. Why does I don't know how he feels about this, but how does he allow his literature to be corrupted like that? In the theater, And because it is CCP, ang kahirapan naman sa CCP, hindi na nila pinamonitor ang
Yung quality.
kung quality in terms of technique, wala ka masasabi, talagang magaling.
Okay.
But I'm talking about, as the cultural center of the Philippines, their job most of all is to preserve the values, our cultural values. And they have a commitment to educating the youth. Now, if they do not know what's happening downstairs there, or if they condone it, paano naman? And I was just thinking, no wonder how hardened our youth have become. Of course, we all know that these things have happened, but they have to be so graphically illustrated.
Chris Miliado did that.
Kilala ba si Chris? Bakit
yeah.
naman siya ganun? Kilala ko rin siya pero I really don't know him. He's a later version of the UP crop, Oo.
Aral din sa States.
Oo. Pero, for example,
Ma'am, you saw-
our portrait, UST, we went to Korea, International Theater Festival.
But when was
in
this one?
2002. And we went. And we brought portrait with us. And what was interesting was when we saw a Danish company of only two. And we didn't understand a word that they were saying, but it was a play in complete nudity.
Oh?
Nudity,
As in, the whole play?
The whole play was about two nude people, and they were
Danish
they
company.
were doing the
They were love,
the love,
love
the
making.
love act, no?
The love act.
But it was so beautiful,
Oh.
so
Can you still remember?
beautifully, so you know, you would not feel at
offended,
all,
or insulted.
throw up, the
Throw up.
feeling of throwing up, no, that was not there. And ang nakakatawa, kasama namin yung mga pare, yung Father Pons, and these were the top rector of UST, and
Ponce,
the
yeah.
company had asked us to sit on the stage.
On the
Hindi in
stage?
the audience, kundi
Oh.
to sit with them on the stage, ano. Di ba?
Wow.
Talagang very close. And then, kaya pala nung umuwi, ingay-ingay ng dalawang pare kasi in their whole life, they never thought that they would be witness to a scene like that, but which was so aesthetically presented. I mean,
Can you still remember?
ha?
Can you still remember the title?
Hindi ko alam Korean
Hindi.
lahat
Korean
Everything was
lahat.
Korean, no?
Okay.
And people spoke in Korean. And
But the play is Korean. Oh, no.
the whole thing was mime. Mime. No, yun ang dala nila sa festival.
For 2 hours? They were
Yeah, about an hour and a half.
hour and a half.
But the whole thing was done so...
It's like ballet in a play.
Oh, parang play, oo. Ang sabi ng isang pare, ang linis-linis ng katawan, pati yung singit. Sabi, linis ng singit. At saka pati yung mga pubic hair and blonde.
Blonde.
Blonde lahat. Kasi mga Danish Oo. Pero they gasped at the beauty of such a natural act that we had always associated with
Lovely.
brutality
Sex.
or offense or ugliness. We always talk about rape. Wala, hindi rape ito This was the natural love act.
The whole play is about love making, all forms.
Ganon. So this is what they're doing in Europe. 2002, ngayon 2005 na, so I don't know how things are going. Pero sa atin, if we think that we are being contemporary by dealing with subjects of sex, I still think it's gimmickry. And what I feel bad about was I talked to the girl after
Tess Hamyas?
ewan ko, hindi yung pangalan, Anyway, hindi ba yung restaurant, nakadikit lamang yung dun sa, sa Matute, di ba? Paglabas nila, may pintuan yun from the dressing room straight into the restaurant. So she came out, and ako naman, I thought that she should be congratulated. So I said, "Congratulations, Iha." And her face was so innocent. Hindi man lang siya na-disturb nung kanyang ginagawa. Kaya sabi ko, naku, talagang iba na ngayon ng
This was the Mestiza?
Mestizahin, no?
That's
Mestiza.
the 20-year-old actress, si Diana Mahalay. She's with the UP, Tanghal UP.
Ayun, isa pa. Well, that's the difference. Talagang, I'm not saying, that we are deteriorating anything. It's a generational gap, but I keep thinking of, I just feel that our nation should, when we talk about values, we have to go back to our religion. We are Catholics. I do not know if you are, but we are Christians anyway. And there's nothing in the Christian theology that encourages sex. It is a natural thing, but it's not supposed to be flaunted like that. Second, I feel we are Asians, and we cannot prescribe to Western values. Although they say that globalization now is American imperialism. But I don't know how I was just thinking, paano ka na kaya sa States? After all, I have studied in the States so many times. And I don't know how things are now.
Pero, ma'am, do you also watch the repertory and yung PETA? Do you get to watch those?
Well, PETA once in a while.
What was
But
the
even
last?
then, I haven't
Forgot.
seen anything at all since...
You've seen all of these films siguro, like Once on This Island, I mean played Once on This Island.
I don't like musicals eh.
Talaga, pareho pa.
Well, I like musicals.
Saint Louis, love.
I like music.
Oo.
But I think I'm wasting my time going
why?
to
Musicals?
musicals. I'd rather read.
Why is that?
There's so much literature to read. Oh.
Why do you don't like people singing their lines? Why?
Naalim.
Yung musicals,
Well, they
you get
don't-
bored ba? You get
Well, for example, hindi naman sa off the record ha,
sige.
I saw, ano ba ito?
St. Louis.
Yung hindi, I saw repertory do Les Miserables dito sa sa Meralco.
Meralco.
But the trouble is, we cannot do them well because the casting is always very uneven.
Oh wait, what do you mean?
For example, you have somebody like Odi Gemora who's excellent. Pero lahat yung mga tinatawag naming supers, yung mga the ones who are watching the barricades, they don't look like men. They all look like children or they mga maliliit, mga payat, mga ganon. So I find myself, because I know theater, I guess, I go there and I find myself just criticizing this
Yeah,
and
you have
that
the
and
right
that.
to
No. And it's not fair because I'm not really the typical audience. The people who go there, I'm sure, enjoy it because they don't have, their critical senses are not like mine. And they don't go there to criticize, they really go there to enjoy. Tsaka lalo na yung mga kaibigan, yung kamag-anak nila yun, lahat ng mga ganyan, siyempre, they're hometown crowd. It's always a hometown crowd. So, I've heard so much about Tubarson and Island, pero what's so good about it? I'd much rather remain, I love South Pacific.
Okay.
So, I don't think anything can beat South Pacific when it comes
You
to...
saw Cabaret?
No.
By-
Was it shown here?
Yeah, by New Boys, the one with Monique, the group of Monique Wilson.
Si Monique. Yeah.
In Green Hills, sa Music Museum.
Yeah, well, well, they're also so good, I guess. But I really cannot enjoy this Broadway stuff eh.
Oh, why is that?
Well, I'd rather look at the original or the film. Bakit lang mag-accept ako mag-local when I can be busy directing my own play?
Okay.
I mean, to me, time is so precious. I have so little time left. So, sometimes I sit down and I read plays and I read it alone and I say, why do I read alone? If I could invite some people to read with me and then I'll give them good merienda, hindi sayang ang panahon kasi we all learned about this play together.
And then you discuss it together.
For example, I called up, this morning, I called up Loretta Macasyar Sikat. That's the daughter of the former Chief Justice.
Loretta Sikat.
Loretta Macasyar. And she's a UP professor. And she told...
She's not the daughter of Luna, sister of Luna Sikat, no? Rogelio Sikat, no? Or
Yung dati, basta siya ang husband ng dating NEDA. Chief ng
okay.
NEDA. Well, anyway, she told me once that she wanted to try theater. She's a brilliant woman. Sabi ko, sige, sabi ko, come to Sala Theater because in Sala Theater we put on the play. Doon lang para sa kaibigan natin. Ngayon, we all bring our own food so it becomes a party. Pero if we think that it is worth putting in more time, we work hard at it. And then I always use my connections with CCP to bring you there so that you will know how it feels to perform in a real theater. Ganon.
Ma'am,
Then,
how powerful are your CCP?
ha?
How-
Powerful ang CCP.
Yeah.
The hands now are my friends. Si
I see.
Nanding Joseph and
Yeah.
Ness Hardin. They're
They're
very
like your
junior to
students.
me.
Students.
Oh, hindi man, no, not my
no.
students, but they're all younger.
One call and they will...
Hindi naman. I do not really ask unless I think my play is good. Hindi sila mapapahiya sa akin. In other words, at saka talagang ako lang naman ang kumakayod ng theater in the community. And I'm the only one who's really pulling in people to know what theater is all about so that they will go to the theater because we need an audience for the theater.
Yeah. What do you think, ma'am? Why is it like that? Now we have to bring theater to the people. What is about theater that somehow
They do not know anything about the thrill of
watching live?
going to the theater. First, it is more expensive.